my fellow wizards! With so many different spellements available, it can be hard to figure out where to begin if you want to max out each of your spellement paths, especially when in many cases you'll need close to 700 spellements per spell to reach their full potential. So today, I'll be covering all the methods to earn Arc 1 spellements, which include all your Ravenwood trained spells rank 1 through 6, as well as my personal top picks for the best ways to get them so you can spend less time grinding and more time pulverizing your enemies with your powered up spells. First, let's take a look at your paid options for the players who would rather just whip out their credit card than do any grinding. The Malister Saga Spellamental Pack is pretty much going to be your best premium option to get spellements quickly. Each pack costs 199 crowns and randomly drops ranks 1 through 6 spellements in quantities of 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 30. Note that the last 3 slots from the pack will always drop spellements from your current wizard school. I will say that while this does cost crowns to open, if you do the daily trivia on KingsIsle's website to earn 100 free crowns a day, you can open this pack every 2 days without having to spend a dime, which isn't too awful. For your other paid option, there's also the Seasonal Scroll of Fortune, which has both paid and unpaid rewards for earning event points, some of which can be spellements, so it's always worth checking to see if there's any spellements to earn by participating, whether you plan on paying to unlock the full scroll or not. Moving on, there's actually a passive way to earn Arc 1 spellements just by questing through each world if you're a lower level wizard. For completing quests, you'll often earn both experience and several spellements from that world, which doesn't sound like a lot, but can definitely add up over time. For example, you can earn rank 1 spellements from questing in Wizard City, rank 1 to 2 spellements for questing in Krokotopia, etc. up to Dragonspyre, and you can tell ahead of time if a quest will give you spellements if you see this spellement icon. Obviously, there's a finite amount of spellements you can earn this way, but it definitely gives players a helpful boost. Up next, let's talk about 3 different types of chests that can earn you Arc 1 spellements: cantrip, wooden, and silver. Cantrip chests are interactive chests that require 3 wizards to cast the Magic Touch cantrip on the chest to unlock it. To use cantrips in the first place, you need to be level 25 and finish the quest given by Abner K. Doodle, who will direct you to Asteria to learn how cantrips works. Cantrip chests begin spawning in Marleybone, appear in most of the mainline worlds, and drop 7 to 8 random spellements when opened. So for Arc 1 worlds, Marleybone drops rank 4 spellements, Mooshu drops rank 5, and Dragonspyre drops rank 6. The main downside to this method is obviously first that you need 2 other wizards present to open the cantrip chests, and it does cost 5 energy to use the Magic Touch cantrip. However, if you're out questing with friends, this can be an easy way to nab a few more spellements, cause it's definitely not fun when you're all alone and have to bypass yet another cantrip chest because you have no friends. Thankfully for wooden and silver chests, you don't need any other wizards to help you. To get spellements from wooden chests, you'll need a pet with the talent Elemental or Spiritual Retriever, which allows you to hit this button when near a wooden chest to direct your pet to open the chest for you and find spellements. Just make sure you don't open the chest yourself by hitting X next to it, or you won't get any spellements. Opening chests in each Arc 1 world will get you a random mix of spellements allocated to that world, so the main challenge of this method is getting the correct pet talent unlocked, which can be a bit of a process. I have a dedicated video guide on how to unlock and use the Elemental and Spiritual Retriever pet talents on your pets, so definitely check that out if you're interested in this method. Finally, for silver chests, you just need to interact with the chest and complete the minigame in order to earn 1 spellement, which differs depending on which world the silver chest was in. You'll either get the Shock-a-Lock or Catch a Key minigame, neither of which is particularly challenging, so while I definitely wouldn't recommend this as an efficient farming method, these can be just something you complete when you see a random silver chest sitting around, since every spellement helps. Shifting over to crafting, you can actually craft all kinds of spellements through the Portal of Peril event by exchanging the event currency, fortune coins, with the NPC Madame Magda located in the fairgrounds of Wizard City. Now, unfortunately, as of writing this video, Portal of Peril has been temporarily removed from the game due to a number of bugs that the devs need to fix. But it should return sometime in 2026. And it's a bummer it's not currently available because this is actually one of the best ways to quickly get spellements. During Portal of Peril, players can run gauntlets solo or with a team and earn fortune coins to exchange for various rewards, including Arc 1 spellements. Once Portal of Peril returns, if you have the badge Savior of the Spiral for completing Dragonspyre's main questline, you'll be able to exchange fortune coins for Arc 1 spellements. You can either exchange 4 fortune coins for an Arc 1 spellement of your school, or exchange 1 fortune coin for 2 random Arc 1 spellements, which I personally think is the better deal, especially if you have multiple wizards that need spellements. Per Portal of Peril event, you can easily earn over 500 fortune coins for participating on top of other rewards. So that's a lot of spellements you can easily redeem just for running the gauntlet a few times, especially if you also do the event on multiple wizards. Finally, we have our main method for earning Arc 1 spellements, good old-fashioned boss farming. Beginning in Krokotopia, you can farm various bosses for spellements, with elemental bosses dropping elemental and balance spellements, spiritual bosses dropping spiritual and balance spellements, and balance bosses dropping all three. Unfortunately, Wizard City bosses do not drop spellements, so players will have to progress at least to Krokotopia to begin farming. In addition, spellements will drop from bosses in the world you are currently questing in and one world below, starting in Marleybone. For example, if you're questing in Marleybone, you can farm bosses in both Marleybone and one world below, Krokotopia, for spellements. However, spellements will stop dropping from bosses 2 worlds below where your main quest is. For example, if you're in Dragonspyre, you can farm Dragonspyre and Mooshu bosses for spellements, but Marleybone and Krokotopia bosses will no longer drop any spellements. Thankfully, you can get around these restrictions by using a level scaling elixir from a Scales of Knowledge in any of the final dungeons in a lower level world to scale down to that world's appropriate level, then go and farm any bosses you want in that world for spellements. For example, if I want to farm bosses in Krokotopia, but I'm currently questing in Dragonspyre, I could use the Scales of Knowledge in the final Krok dungeon to scale down to level 20, and then I can farm any Krok bosses I want for spellements. In Arc 1, you can find Scales of Knowledge in the Temple of Storm in Krokotopia, Big Ben in Marleybone, the Emperor's Throne Room in Mooshu, and the Great Spire in Dragonspyre. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at which bosses drop different spellements in each world. Bosses in Krokotopia drops rank 1 through 3 spellements and include beating Narini in the Royal Hall, the Narini Quartermaster in the Chamber of Fire, Krakenkamen in the Throne Room of Fire, Ogisakwi in the Hall of Champions, Krokotep in the Emperor's Retreat, and Krokopatra in the Temple of Storms, all of whom drop elemental spellements. In addition, there's Kayamate the Great in the Grand Arena, and the Keeper of the Fang in the Vault of Ice, who drop spiritual spellements. Your best options for elemental spellement farming are beating Narini, the Narini Quartermaster, or Ogisakwi, all of whom have similar health and only require 1 fight to access. And for spiritual spellements, you'll want Kai Amate the Great, because the other option, the Keeper of the Fang, is at the end of a longer dungeon, which makes her harder to farm. Up next is Marleybone, where you can farm rank 1 through 4 spellements. You'll want to fight the Gearhead in Hyde Park, Timmy Icepick in Chelsea Court, Pop O'Leary in the Ironworks, Jacques the Scratcher in King's Court. Though note, you actually fight him twice here, and it's the second fight that drops the spellements. And Dr. von Katzenstein in Katzenstein's lab for elemental spellements. And then the Agony Wraiths in both Newgate Prison and Big Ben, as well as Meowiarty and Big Ben for the spiritual spellements. Your best options for this world are definitely Gearhead, Timmy Icepick, or Jacques the Scratcher for elemental spellement farming, and the Agony Wraith in Newgate Prison for the spiritual spellements, because all these bosses only require 1 fight, whereas the others are at the end of long dungeons. Our second to last Arc 1 world, Mooshu, has bosses that drop rank 1 through 5 spellements and include Dudaga in Hamatsu Village, Maito in Tataki Outpost, the War Oni in Crimson Field, Kanago in the Cave of Solitude, and Kyoto in Kishibe Village for elemental spellements. Then for spiritual spellements, you'll want to seek out the Jade Oni in the Jade Palace, Tomogawa the Evil in the Ancient Burial Grounds, Oyotomi the Defiler in the Village of Sorrow, and the Death Oni in the Tree of Life. Finally, we also get a balance boss that drops both elemental and spiritual spellements with the Plague Oni in Shirataki Temple. I would argue your best options here are Dodaga, Maito, Kanago, and Kyoto for elemental spellements, and then the Jade Oni, Tomogawa the Evil, and Oyotomi the Defiler for spiritual spellements, since all the other options require long dungeons to access and farm. The Jade Oni and Oyotomi the Defiler in particular stand out because the Jade Oni can be respawned without ever leaving the dungeon for quick farming, and Oyotomi the Defiler similarly spawns in the overworld so you can quickly change realms to farm him rapidly. Alright, for our final Arc 1 world, Dragonspyre, bosses drop rank 2 through 6 spellements. So note that if you're trying to earn rank 1 spellements like Firecat or Thundersnake, you'll need to farm bosses in another location like Mooshu or Lower Worlds. Bosses you'll want to farm include the Sea Lord in the Plaza of Conquests, Victor Snowcrusher in the Drake Hatchery, Boris Blackrock in the Crucible, and Cronius in the Crystal Grove for elemental spellements. For spiritual spellements, you should look for Vasic Ashweaver in the Grand Chasm, and Vladimir Darkflame in the Labyrinth. And then for bosses that drop all kinds of spellements, you'll want Zarathax in the Tower Archives, the Collector in the Drake Hatchery, Vesta Shadowmark in the Forum, and then the Gurtok Piercer, Gurtok Firebender, and Malister Drake himself in the Crown of Fire. Out of all these options, I think your best choices are going to be the Sea Lord, Victor Snowcrusher, Boris Blackrock, and Cronius for elemental spellements, Vasic Ashweaver for spiritual spellements, and then Zarathax, the Collector, or Vesta Shadowmark for all spellements. Bosses of note here include the Sea Lord and Boris Blackrock that can be respawned rapidly in the overworld with their summoning stones, and Victor Snowcrusher, who can be fought repeatedly by changing realms in the Drake Hatchery, and who also drops the level 50 Archmastery dex. Note that the Collector boss also roams the streets, but she can sometimes be a bit difficult to locate because she doesn't stay in one spot. I will say that if you're intending on farming Malister Drake for any of the level 50 gear, then it makes sense to farm Spellements from him and the 2 Gurtok bosses at the same time, all of whom drop both elemental and spiritual Spellements despite not being balance bosses. But if you just want the Spellements, I'd go for someone like the balance boss Zarathax in the Tower Archives, who is a very quick farm and also drops both elemental and spiritual Spellements. Overall, I'd recommend farming in either Mooshu or Dragonspyre because that gives you the widest range of Spellament drops, either ranks 1 through 5 or 2 through 6 respectively. However, if there's a specific rank of Spellements you're trying to farm, you can narrow it down to whatever specific world is most relevant. As always, balance bosses drop all types of Spellements, so they're also going to be some of your best options for farming in general. I do want to also note that there are Arc 2 bosses that also drop some Arc 1 Spellements, with Celestia dropping ranks 3 through 7, Zepharia dropping 4 through 8, Avalon dropping 5 through 9, and Azteca dropping ranks 6 through 10, so I'll be covering those in a future video for Arc 2 Spellement farming, but higher level wizards may be able to take advantage of that too. Now that we've covered your farming options for Arc 1 worlds, let's also take a look at some other bosses that drop Spellements, including those in raids and boss rematches. Another decent option for Arc 1 Spellament drops, if you're in a guild, is the Voracious Void raid, which has 4 bosses that drop Spellements, including Big Cat Burglar, Goblorian Bandit, the Melody, and the Unfun Guy. Now, obviously, raids can be quite challenging and not very beginner-friendly, and you also need a guild willing to run them, so I don't recommend this option for low-level wizards or more casual players, but raids do generally drop quite a lot of Spellements as well as many other valuable rewards, so it's something to keep in mind if you don't mind a bit of challenge. And speaking of challenges, we also have the Arc 1 boss rematches, which can be crafted with recipes from the NPC Raquel in the arena. Once you craft a boss rematch, you place it in your house or dorm, and then join via the sigil like most regular boss fights. Note, once you complete a boss rematch, you can also recharge them and reuse them with other recipes from Raquel that require less resources than the initial craft. There are boss rematches for each of the final bosses in the Arc 1 worlds, with each dropping different Spellament ranks, as well as other rewards, and each boss comes in both standard and challenge mode forms, with challenge mode dropping slightly more Spellements per run than standard. Lord Nightshade drops rank 1 to 2 Spellements, Krokotopia drops rank 3 Spellements, Meowiarty drops rank 4 Spellements, the Jade Oni drops rank 5 Spellements, and finally Malister drops rank 6 Spellements. You do get quite a number of Spellements per run, usually between 15 to 32, depending on if you chose standard or challenge mode, but these rematches are definitely difficult no matter which version you run, so be prepared to have a team of friends to help you if needed, since a downside to these is that you cannot use team up. So, given all these choices, which are your best options for farming Arc 1 Spellements? I'd argue the best choice is redeeming fortune coins for Spellements in the Portal of Peril event once it becomes available again. The event tends to be pretty popular when it runs, so players should have no difficulty finding teams via team up to quickly run the gauntlets, and you can fairly easily earn over 500 coins per event per wizard to exchange for Spellements. Then, if you choose to redeem the 2 random Arc 1 Spellements for 1 fortune coin, that can net you over 1,000 Spellements per event, which is kind of insane. Obviously, it's very frustrating that this event is currently unavailable, but hopefully we'll get it back as soon as possible and as bug-free as possible, so players once again have an easy way to earn a massive amount of Spellements. So what are your other options when Portal of Peril isn't available? For the most accessibility, I would focus on bosses in Mooshu or Dragonspyre since they drop the widest range of Spellements, ranks 1 through 5 or ranks 2 to 6 respectively, though you may want to pick lower worlds if there's a specific rank of Spellament you want to focus on. Balance bosses that drop all types of spellements are the best if you're trying to farm spellements for multiple wizards, but Mooshu's only option is the Plague Oni, which is at the end of a long dungeon, so instead you'll probably want to go with easily respawned bosses like the Jade Oni or Oyotomi the Defiler for the spiritual spellements, and then any of the elemental bosses that only require one fight. For Dragonspyre, definitely just farm Malastare and the twin Gurktok bosses if you're also intending on farming the level 50 gear, but otherwise I definitely recommend Zerathax, who drops all kinds of spellements, and then easily respawn bosses like Sea Lord, Boris Blackrock, or Victor Snowcrusher for elemental spellements, with Vashik Ashweaver then probably being your best option for spiritual spellements. However, if you're not afraid of a challenge or you're a higher level, the boss rematches and raids can drop a sizable number of spellements per run. All the other options I listed here, like questing and chess, aren't the most efficient alternatives, but can be great secondary choices that you can either earn passively, like through questing, or something you grab as you go along, like opening the cantrip, wooden, and silver chests when you see them, or earning free trivia crowns to buy the occasional spellment pack from the crown shop. It can definitely be overwhelming to max out those spellment paths, but every little bit does add up over time, so don't give up. I will say, however, that you definitely don't need to max your spellment paths to be successful in PvE, so don't feel overly pressured to do so unless you want to. Alright, my fellow wizards, that was my guide on your best options to get Arc 1 spellements. Definitely let me know in the comments what your favorite methods for getting spellements have been, and any other tips and tricks you have. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help me to make more amazing Wiz content for you all. And if you want to support me and the channel further, you can hit the join button below to become one of my awesome channel members. As always, I hope to see you out there in the spiral, and happy questing!